Kumeta Kouji is a gag manga artist that likes to take a topic and play around with it, usually making lots of references to many different things. For example, when talking about stories where boys in puberty obtain some sort of special ability, he lists examples on becoming popular with fictitious things. And one of those examples is Residents of a Girl's Dormitory, as a reference to a manga that was widely popular at the time, Love Hina. Another one is on the topic of manga characters being distressed over easy promises exchanged with girls, and one of the examples given is promising to go to Tokyo University together, which leads into failing to admit 3 times. A reference to a manga that was widely popular at the time, Love Hina. Another one is on the topic of men being made to go along the rules of women, and the example given is if 2 people who like each other get into Tokyo University, they can become happy. A reference to a manga that was widely popular at the time, Love Hina. When I put it like this, it feels like Kumeta Kouji is taking a lot of jabs at Love Hina, but he does that to all sorts of things. But this case is notable because the mangaka of Love Hina, Akamatsu Ken, would end up responding. On a chapter of Katte ni Kaizou, the manga that Kumeta was drawing at the time, his main character says he's not able to graduate from reading manga if he doesn't read it out loud. And in the example given, the character says, Shinobu-chan's panties? What should I do? My heart's beating so fast. It's a line-for-line reference to Love Hina, when the protagonist, Keitaro, finds one of the residents, Shinobu, bare print panties. And that is when Akamatsu finally reacted, posting in his personal website where in March of the year 2000, for the first time, he uttered the words Kumeta Bastard, which sounds a little bit dramatic if he was actually mad. Kumeta Bastard! Without honorifics. He has the nerve to joke about Love Hina every single week! Sorry, I was talking to myself. For a 2000 audience, it wasn't very clear if he was angry or not, so he had to clarify that he, who's happy to buy Ero Dojinshi of Love Hina, wouldn't be mad at something like this. However, this made 2 things clear. He was aware of Kumeta, and he was willing to have fun with it. As a matter of fact, he was asking for more, and some more he did get. Sometimes it was inoffensive references, although Akamatsu still had fun calling Kumeta a bastard. On a chapter about having to pay the land tax though, Kumeta draws a very unflattering version of Love Hina's main heroine, Narusegawa. He even wrote a sorry outside the panel, but even so, Akamatsu once again called him a bastard, and also said he would settle things with Kumeta one day, although he wasn't sure how. Things were settled really fast actually. On a chapter about vagueness, when listing about not knowing if you're happy or not about something, Kumeta Kouji shows that he was happy to be nominated for a Kodansha manga award. But the winner of the category was that. Of course, that refers to Love Hina. This led to Akamatsu posting another Kumeta Bastard in his diary. He was feeling sad Kumeta wasn't doing any jokes lately and even calls him his rival, although with this, things were settled. Next time even, Akamatsu flaunts his victory and thinks he might invite the bastard to drink and listen to his grievances. They never met up to this point, and they wouldn't meet for a good while. The references kept appearing here and there. In a chapter about things done as insurance, Love Hina is the example for putting lots of cute girls in the story is insurance in the manga world. Akamatsu seemed to enjoy the fact that the idea of having lots of beautiful girls equals Love Hina, even though at that point the series had already finished, so he took it as the great sensei's seal of approval. Also took the opportunity to praise him for his ability to keep drawing gag manga. But soon enough, Akamatsu would start a new serialization, and soon enough, Kumeta would poke at it. Rather, it was a very straight jab this time. In a chapter about people not being able to say anything when the thing goes too far, Kumeta draws himself into the manga and says, God damn it, the readers ended up liking it, but it doesn't mean that it's a good thing to just put out a bunch of girls. So, how many are there this time? 31 girls. Every girl in the class has a proper character setting. and it seems that every one of them already have a voice actors decided, and they're making CDs and every character has a song. If you go that far, I can't say anything anymore. Yes, compared to the 5 girls living in the dormitory in Love Hina, Negima, the main character, is the teacher to 31 different girls. Kumeta once again pokes fun at it in a chapter about alchemists and people who take lots of popular things and make it into a new work. The first example given was Harry Potter plus Azumanga plus all sorts of Gauge equals... Of course the answer was magical teacher Negima. Akamatsu was very happy to see these. But then things ended for Kumeta as well. Katte ni Kaizou ended serialization, where a week later, Akamatsu posted in his diary just saying that because of Kumeta, Midori no Hibi's emotional ending was overshadowed, and he was feeling sympathy for Inoue Kazuro, the mangaka of that series. Kumeta has done a twist ending for Katte ni Kaizou, where every bizarre character and occurrence that happened within the manga, for the whole 6 years it lasted, was fully a fantasy created by the protagonists, as they were patients in a closed ward, which does leave quite an impression, and it's not the only time he did something like that. There was silence between them, but in 2005, the 4th volume of Odo no Inu by Yasuhiko Yoshikazu went on sale, and on the obi of the book was a comment by Kumeta Kouji, as well as an advert for his upcoming work in weekly shonen magazine, Sayonara Zetsubou Sensei. Akamatsu of course commented about the rumors of Kumeta going to Weekly Shonen Sunday to the Weekly Shonen magazine, the magazine he was working at the time. He even invites him to try to get a Kodansha manga award, putting the spotlight on the great Kumeta Sensei's new work, and practically begs Kumeta to throw something at him. Which he didn't, until he did. On Sayonara Zetsubou Sensei Chapter 10, the protagonist Itoshiki Nozomu, who is a teacher, opens his student register book, showing off all of his students, all 32 of them, not 31. And this panel is a direct reference to Mahou Sensei Negima, where the protagonist, 9-year-old Negi Springfield, is given the task of becoming an English teacher in Japan, to complete his magic training. And just as he gets into the class for the first time, the reader is presented with a double-page spread of all of his 31 students, where each will be a moe character that you could usually see in Golge. For example, a shy bookworm, an Ojo-sama, a genius scientist, an acrobat, Rory vampire, and a net idol. Sayonara Zetsubou Sensei, on the other hand, is a story of an extremely negative teacher whose name can be read as Despair, and he is in charge of this class filled with troublesome students. For example, a girl with extreme OCD, a stalker, a hikikomori, a girl suspected of suffering domestic violence, an illegal immigrant, and a net idol. The blood in the register book hiding the other names is definitely not because the other students weren't thought of yet at the time. In a 2016 interview even, about 10 years after this joke, when asked about why he made so many characters in Zetsubo Sensei compared to Katte ni Kaizou, he said he saw series being published all around where it felt like it was fine with just putting a bunch of girls in it, so he sarcastically thought, what if every one of them had an issue? And when the interviewer pointed out that Kumeta used to make lots of jokes using Akamatsu's works, and that Zetsubo Sensei could be seen as an attempt to challenge works like Mahou Sensei Negima, Kumeta answered with, right? I put out lots of shallow characters. Which could be seen as a confirmation that it was indeed a parody of Negima and works alike. Back to 2007 though, Akamatsu announced he met the great respected Kumeta Sensei for the first time, and they went drinking together. When Akamatsu asked why he hasn't been doing any jokes with Negima lately, Kumeta just said, Negima has been boring, so he hasn't been reading it. Posted on April Fools. And this will be the first of many April Fools jokes. Akamatsu actually referenced Kumeta much more than Kumeta did Akamatsu. He genuinely seemed to have taken a liking towards him. In a chapter joking about companies putting celebratory words in their products as a pat on their own back, Negima was used as an example. This time, Akamatsu was not impressed by the bastard though, and even took a jab at him by telling people to pay attention to volume sales of the master and disciple. Master referring to Kumeta Kouji, and disciple to Hata Kenjiro, who at the time was writing Hayate no Gotoku, Hayate the combat butler. Hata Kenjiro was Kumeta's assistant for Katte ni Kaizou, which he worked for a duration of 5 years, and they developed quite a good relationship. And the experience also had an influence on Hata's style, such as the way he shaded characters or using full-body portraits on top of panels to represent a character's first appearance in the chapter. He also learned from Kumeta about the joy of making their characters cross-dress. The next day, Akamatsu posted the sales rankings, where his Negima got first place, and for some reason, he also purposefully put arrows next to Hayate and Zetsubo Sensei. Hayate got 3rd, and Zetsubo Sensei got 8th. Despite this mockery, Zetsubo Sensei would eventually get the Kodansha manga award, to which Kumeta Kouji apologized for winning. Since his series was also getting an anime adaptation, he thought too many good things were happening, and it was like a death flag, so he decided he should die, even drawing on that week's chapter asking to be killed. So he set up a living funeral. If you've seen the face that appears in the first opening of Sayonara Zetsubou Sensei, that is the same portrait of Kumeta Kouji used on his funeral. Well, I just wanted to talk about that because it's an interesting story. When asked about this living funeral on his interview for his art book Kuigaten in 2016, he makes a direct reference to the time Katte ni Kaizou lost to Love Hina, and he thought with this, Akamatsu's glory has been cancelled. They sure like each other. After the Kodansha awards though, Kumeta was neglecting Akamatsu a little bit too much, so Akamatsu decided to make a Zetsubo Sensei reference in Negima, where they go to Tokyo Big Sight and the teacher, Negi, sees one of the books drawn by his student, and that book is Zetsubo Sensei themed. The same book was later used in the Sayonara Zetsubou Sensei anime, which is also interesting because Zetsubo Sensei and Negima both had anime adaptations done by the same studio, by the same director, 1 year apart from each other. One time Akamatsu appeared in a TV show as a rich mangaka, which considering Love Hina sold 20 million copies in Japan alone, he was. Kumeta's reaction was to use it as a joke in a chapter about ignoring things, which Akamatsu commented in his diary that he heard about being used as a joke, but he ignored it since it was printed towards the end of the magazine. But he also pleaded people to read as it was a very interesting manga. And then he posted an Amazon link to Hayate Volume 12. In an interview, Kumeta revealed that his house is actually pretty close to Akamatsu's studio, saying the top floor of the high-rise apartment always has the lights on. Akamatsu said he went to his balcony to look down below, but he couldn't tell which light came from the Kumeta Bastard house. Hata Kenjiro also ends up doing a Negima parody, which Akamatsu was happy and impressed about, since he used 2 whole pages instead of just a panel. By this point, Akamatsu stopped receiving emails asking if he and Kumeta were fighting. In the Zetsubo Sensei chapter, the character Chiri makes all those who don't work to give thanks to those who do. And later in the chapter, they say that authors who are on a break should say their thanks to those who are getting published. The chapter released on the exact same week Akamatsu was taking a break, so he did give thanks to the Kumeta Bastard in his diary. Another April Fool's joke, 2nd year in a row, not many people fell for this one. Pictures of a sign event that happened in Taiwan came out, and so Akamatsu saw how Kumeta looked like for the first time. He was impressed to say the least. In a Zetsubo Sensei chapter about people who can do 3 things, as a baseball reference I believe, a Negima fan appeared who can do all 3 things. Buy the manga, buy the anime DVD, and buy the goods. Akamatsu says the Kumeta Bastard is just bothered Negima sells more than Zetsubo Sensei, but also says he knows of Kumeta's bad secret, and he was looking forward to meeting him for the first time in Kodansha year-end party. Although the great Kumeta Sensei, who he respects so much, didn't appear, so their meeting was postponed until the next party. Sunday and Shonen magazines were celebrating 50 years together, Akamatsu was sad he couldn't meet with Hata Kenjiro, but he did manage to see Kumeta, but he was not able to talk to him due to editors being in the way, so once again their meeting is postponed. Hata replies to Akamatsu's diary saying he can call him anytime. Akamatsu invites him to drink together near Kumeta Sensei's studio. Akamatsu reveals in a post on his diary that the Kumeta Bastard sent an unidentified pretty voice actress a mail asking for help since his manuscript was never ending, and that seemed to be Kumeta's bad secret. But it was posted on April Fools. Third April Fools in a row he mentioned Kumeta. He also called him a carnivorous man on a later date when talking about a drinking session he had with Hata Kenjiro. In Akamatsu's own birthday, he points out he's the same age as the great Kumeta Sensei on his own birthday, and just like the April Fools, it's not the only time he did that. Akamatsu posted about being nervous Kumeta would pass him in chapter numbers since he took lots of breaks. In Kumeta Sensei chapter 201, there's a good use of a parody of the Negima logo. The chapter didn't have a front illustration in the magazine, but in the volume release, the cover chapter was a big illustration of Negima in Kumeta's cover style. And it's the cover of the weekly shonen magazine where they announced the first Negima TV anime. Zetsubo Sensei was not even releasing at the time. It's a chapter about gaps and saying Zetsubo Sensei was a niche series that still filled gaps in audiences, so you could see the main character on the gap of the cover. Kumeta's Katte ni Kaizou got an anime announcement and Akamatsu reacted saying, It's not like I'm frustrated or anything like that. Written like an stereotypical tsundere, and so begins Akamatsu's tsundere arc. For example, he saw that a chapter of Zetsubo Sensei and Katte ni Kaizou will be released in each other's magazines, and thankfully, he was not worried at all that the Kumeta Bastard was on a break and was not relieved when he saw it was because he was drawing these two chapters. Even fellow mangaka started pointing out his impressive tsundere act, although according to him, he was just being tsun, not being dere. It's not like I'm against regulations on expression for the sake of Kumeta. Also, he's not my close friend. I never even met him once. Written like a stereotypical tsundere. It's not like I'm against the transformation of copyright infringement into a non-prosecutable offense for the sake of protecting Kumeta, do you understand? Written like a stereotypical tsundere. It was announced that the Negima movie was going to be a double bill alongside the Hayate movie, and he replied to a fan that he could see the frustrated face of the great Kumeta Sensei. Unfortunately for him, production issues led to the Negima movie to be 20 minutes shorter than planned. But he also mentioned there will be very interesting footage shown after the Negima movie that could only be seen in theaters. To help fill the gap, there was a short 2-minute Zetsubo Sensei Katte ni Kaizou crossover animation played between the two movies. Akamatsu said that only this time he felt like he was helped by that guy. In a newspaper conversation between Akamatsu and Hata, we revealed that Kumeta would go to every dubbing session bringing provisions. He heard from one of the voice actresses that she received a mail from Kumeta saying that the manuscript was not finishing, and Akamatsu asks, "Do you get now how outrageous Kumeta is?" So turns out that the bad secret told in April Fools was real, and explains why Akamatsu called him a carnivorous man. It's funny because we're laughing saying mangaka don't usually have contacts with the voice actresses that work on their adaptations, but Hata Kenjiro ended up marrying someone just like that. Is this whole video just me gossiping? Yes. When Negima ended and Akamatsu tweeted about it, he made sure to reference Zetsubo Sensei, thankful they didn't end at the same time, remembering the ending of Katte ni Kaizou and Midori no Hibi. And well, for those in the know, Kumeta did do something similar, and you could argue that it was much more impactful this time. When Zetsubo Sensei ended a few weeks later, he tweeted again, saying he's not really interested in Kumeta, and he's better because his manga lasted 20 chapters longer. But then finishes the tweet thanking him for his hard work for the past 7 years. Also, that both their series ending at about the same time was 100% a coincidence, written like a stereotypical tsundere. But even if her series ended, their quote-unquote relationship didn't. On an interview on the anime for Joshiraku, a manga drawn by Yasu and written by Kumeta, he said there were times he couldn't answer the questions by director Tsutomu Mizushima and that he had to learn from Akamatsu Ken, who reacted by saying Kumeta actually likes him a lot. But it's not like the opposite is true, okay? Written like a stereotypical tsundere. He acted vexed when learning Kumeta became the character designer for the anime adaptation of Uchoten Kazoku, acted shocked when he and the Kumeta Bastard both got nominated at the same time for a Seiyun award in the comic category. Neither won, by the way. Another April Fool's joke where he says they broke up because of clashing art styles, and he posted many times about him on each of their birthdays. So Akamatsu started releasing the manga Yukyu Holder, and Kumeta started releasing the Impatient Count and the Time Thief, both at about the same time. Across 3 chapters, Kumeta set up a joke of making a Yukyu Holder reference when having the protagonist of Yukyu Holder crushed under a koteka. Akamatsu comments that Kumeta just likes him too much, but he doesn't really care about him, written like a stereotypical tsundere, although he did say welcome back at the comments on the magazine. Bookwalker even had a Kodansha e-book fair, putting Akamatsu and Kumeta works against each other. Akamatsu asked, who came up with this? It makes them look like they're friends or something. This Kumeta series was short-lived though, which led to a shocked Akamatsu saying, "You're lying." Hata Kenjiro finished Hayate and starts releasing a new series, Tonikaku Kawaii, Fly Me to the Moon. And at the very beginning of the serialization, Kumeta was brought to the special Katte ni Kaizou chapter, and he just dunks on Tonikaku Kawaii, dunks on people who used to read Hayate, and of course, he throws a direct punch at Yukyu Holder, joking that if Tonikaku Kawaii doesn't get popular, Hata will just bring back his best characters, and the title might even change to Hayate 2 Tonikaku Kawaii. To which they bring up Negima, a joke that references how Yukyu Holder was titled Yukyu Holder Mahou Sensei Negima 2 for a while.
Yukyu Holder Mahou Sensei Negima 2.
Akamatsu seemed to have bought Shonen Sunday for the first time in a good while for the sake of Hata Kenjiro's new work, not for the sake of the Kumeta Bastard, and tells him not to misunderstand it, written like a stereotypical tsundere. Kumeta starts releasing Kakushigoto in the monthly shonen magazine, and when an anime adaptation was decided, Akamatsu was once again flabbergasted by it. You're lying. And also linked to an interview where Kumeta appears in person and mimicked the first reaction when he learned about how Kumeta looks like. That's Kumeta? But turns out he actually ended up helping in the production of the show. On episode 3 of Kakushigoto, a 3D model is shown as an example of 3D being used to draw annoying backgrounds, and the 3D data was presented to them by Akamatsu Ken. It is a 3D model of the Fairyland Hall in Yukyu Holder. He has used such techniques to create backgrounds since at least his Negima days, 2003. Of course, he just had the 3D data laying around, so he decided to borrow it. It wasn't because he likes Kumeta or anything like that, reading like a stereotypical tsundere. Another April Fool's joke, another reference to Kumeta when talking about his birthday, written like a stereotypical tsundere. But then 2021 came. It's been a long time since this all begun. The day of his birthday, he once again posted about how he would be the same age of the respected mangaka Kumeta Kouji Sensei. But something interesting also happened at the same time. Because of the coronavirus, the Kodansha Manga Awards were halted for a year. So they decided that in the following year, the 44th and 45th awards were to be held both at the same time. Akamatsu Ken was part of the selection committee in the 44th awards. Kumeta Kouji was part of the selection committee in the 45th awards. So because of that, for the first time in 20 years, Akamatsu Ken and Kumeta Kouji would have the chance to meet face to face and engage with each other. So Akamatsu asked people on Twitter how he should approach the bastard with a poll. And the votes went like this. 17.5% of users voted for a confession of love, as in Kumeta confesses to Akamatsu. 18.6% of users voted so Akamatsu would approach Kumeta asking to be paid for the 3D data using Kakushigoto. 27.8% of users voted so Akamatsu would say he was a fan of Kumeta and ask him for a sign, while handing him Volume 1 of Hayate no Gotoku. But the one that got the most votes, with 36.1% of total votes, hug him from behind and take a picture, post it on Twitter. And so the first direct contact Akamatsu Ken ever had with the Kumeta Bastard after a 20-year-long back and forth ended up in a hug. Of course, with Kumeta's consent. Akamatsu also got Kumeta to sign a volume of Yukyu Horror in what he called a historical settlement, and later he gifted the volume to one of his followers, closing the pages of their 20-year-long rivalry? A pro wrestling type of rivalry. This feels like a closure, but well, things didn't really change much. Akamatsu kept referencing Kumeta on his birthday when Kumeta gets some sort of big project and on April Fools. For example, an isekai collab where they plan to make a work called After He Became Despaired in Another World, the Kumeta Bastard Became a Girl, which is a little bit lewd, and Negima/Zetsubo Sensei characters would appear in it. Eventually, Akamatsu would run for a seat in the House of Councilors. As a matter of fact, after Akamatsu confirmed he was allowed to take the picture, the bastard said, "Don't use it for your campaign." He got good intuition. Kumeta too became a very popular and successful mangaka during the time this all happened, and of course kept doing his thing, is still referencing Akamatsu once in a while. For example, in the last volume of Kakushigoto, he had great expectations for the future legislator Akamatsu, said in a somewhat sarcastic tone, and a reference to his campaign in his new work, Shibuya Near Family. In chapter 33 of that series though, in one of the pages you can see on the blackboards on the background, "Congratulations on being elected," and 530,000, which is the power level of Frieza's first form, but it's also the amount of votes Akamatsu Ken received to be elected. And I think this is where things stand right now. They're both living their own lives, doing their thing, although Akamatsu once again referenced Kumeta in his own birthday, this year even, just a few months ago. But there's not much more to say. I only looked into all this because I heard the term Kumeta no Yaro, Kumeta Bastard, and was really interested in it. This ended up a bit different from what I usually do, but I'll be talking about a cute girl next time for sure. If you enjoy my videos, please consider becoming a patron. Now, I was going to answer some questions and read some patron comments, but nobody really sent anything to be read here. Which honestly, better for me! It makes things easier. But I think I should at least thank the people who supported me. So thank you Dark Rose, thank you Aldope, thank you Alari, thank you MeowMix64, thank you Claudia Kaplan, thank you Sauce, thank you Gangsang, thank you Sat, thank you Lime Phoenix, and thank you Titan. If I mispronounce your name, don't worry about it. Just don't worry about it. Well, that's it. See ya.